space nerds. What is better than space games? I'll give you a second. That's right, nothing. So let's talk about them. This week, Star Citizen is getting 100 new underground facilities placed with new missions going into testing. Elite Dangerous has released a new ship. X4 is getting political, and I've got a new space horror game for you to drool over. Here's this week's Space Games news straight to your subfeed. Star Citizen 4.3 has entered its first wave of testing for the update that should be releasing sometime in August. It feels small, but I actually think folks are going to appreciate these additions. First up, the update is bringing with it a new mission giver, Arkan Malor, with the Hakro Agency, who is a faction we saw listed on the Mercenary Guild at CitizenCon last year. It also brings about 100 new underground facilities and ruins, which may be the first of a new category of locations that's meant to actually expand on the distribution centers that we already know. They'll feature investigation missions in locations that feature NPCs, puzzles, and data to recover. Now, these locations will be split up into 3 separate wings you can explore, the first of 2 which are coming in 4.3, and the last one coming in 4.3.1, probably in the October update. And let me be clear, these areas are really big. They're much bigger than the bunkers that we're used to. They're around the same size you'd expect from maybe a distribution center, possibly a little bit smaller. But with 100 of them, players aren't going to have problems running into other players too often with these, I think. Not only is the lobby armisticed, you also get your own hangar to land in, and the 2 different wings get very deep. They have different levels you're supposed to progress through, so think kind of like what they were talking about with the ArcCorp areas at CitizenCon last year. Personally, I think these are going to make for some really solid exploration for people, and it does seem like they were supposed to be instanced, and that's why they're now just including 100 of them to spread them all out. But we did see in a monthly report recently that they need dynamic server meshing to get instancing working, so I don't know what the mix-up was there. Elsewhere in Star Citizen, the Apollo Medivac from RSI was The Apollo Medivac from RSI was confirmed to be coming in 2025. I made a video covering this last week that kind of dives into why this might not be the best time to release it. Go check that out if you want some more information, but know this. This is probably one of the most beautiful ships to ever come to Star Citizen, so expect some hubbub when it arrives. Back to the update though, while 4.3 did go to Evocati testing, it seems like they wanted to push this out fairly quickly and get a lot of stress testing from a lot of people coming in. For those who are wondering why they might be doing this for 4.3, if you keep an update to a small amount of players who can play it and also show what they're playing to everybody else, by the time everybody else gets access 2 to 3 weeks later, it's not as exciting and that first group of players has moved on. I imagine what they want to do is just get as many players going to these new locations and trying out these new things as possible, so they're trying to get everyone in all at once. But it was also confirmed via the roadmap roundup last week that these new locations won't be coming with the cooperative zones people were expecting, which were seen as the PvE bastion of hope of 2025 that players have been waiting for, so they don't get pew-pewed while they're not doing pew-pew stuff. While this is disappointing to some, I think this is a good sign that CIG understands they need to avoid putting things overly broken into the game, especially when they're pushing this playability narrative. And I know this recent event has been pretty broken, but that was based on a feature that's already in the game that was pretty broken, and I think they treat events a little bit differently. Also in this update, there is some new armor that can be found and looted from the new locations. It combines cloth and hard surfaces, which doesn't happen too often in the game, but we know is something they're starting to focus more on, so I think some players are pretty happy about that. And it's supposedly coming from the ASD Scientific company that actually owned these facilities we're going into, and is also responsible for that irradiated sandworm. They're just getting around. Another Volt weapon is also coming with 4.3, this time a sniper rifle that allows you to store heat within to save your overpowered 360 no-scope headshot for when you truly need it. Dynamic snow is going into testing with this update as well, allowing precipitation to spawn dynamically based on humidity and temperature, rather than just by the devs' design on where they want snow to be. Sick of them putting it on the tropical beaches, you know? Ladder improvements are also back in testing from the 4.2.1 PTU, likely to actually be included in 4.3 and allow us to actually use ladders like normal people. And finally, this update includes a mission distribution tech update, which I will cover in further detail later because it's not really that sexy, but it should help with things like cargo hauling, Wicklow collection missions, and these new missions in these locations, how they spawn and how they're taken by players to make it a little more efficient. For more in-depth information on this patch, my entire podcast episode from this weekend is actually up on Space Tomato 2 right now, and you can go listen to me and Astro Historian talk about our first hands-on impressions from Evocati as we played over the weekend. Elite Dangerous has entered the battle. I have yet to cover this game before, but my first bit of news here is kind of ironic. A new ship has released into Elite Dangerous, and it's in early access on ARCs. Now, ARCs are basically an in-game currency that are limited to an earn rate of 400 ARCs per week, with the ability to purchase them for real cash on the store. It is interesting to see so much of the discussion in the Elite Dangerous community is pointing to these ships as being good additions to Elite Dangerous, but ultimately lamenting the lack of mechanics and features moving forward for Elite Dangerous over. I just want to keep saying Star Citizen. They're pointing out that there is a lower budget attributed to Elite Dangerous at this point, and there's been relative silence on any improvements building on the Odyssey update, which effectively flipped this game on its head by introducing planetary gameplay, but then not really supporting it that much, and leading to the ending of support for this game on consoles. Say what you will, Elite Dangerous has learned a thing or two from Star Citizen. Weirdly, I couldn't find the actual cost of this ship, named the Panther Clipper Mark II, on the page that did announce it, but I'm like Batman with my investigation skills, and Google tells me that they are available for about 19,000 and 38,000 ARCs, depending on the bundle. So about 48 weeks of in-game playtime if you consider the 400 ARCs cap per week. Depending on who you are, this isn't a huge ask, especially considering this is a late game ship and most players are already well on their way to that bank account figure if they've been playing for a while. While I support a grind and I love some progression shooting for a ship over the course of weeks or months, it'll be a bummer to some that you have to wait a few months to earn this with non-rate limited in-game credits, and even then it sounds like progression is struggling a little bit. As a Star Citizen, you have my condolences. The 8.0 update for X4 has reached beta. If you don't know about X4, this is a single-player space sim that allows you to scale economic, exploration, and combat-focused gameplay from a single spaceship up to your own fleet that you can control. It's actually pretty cool. You can build space stations, you can run a successful commercial empire, or you can just screw off on your own and do things. One of the best parts of this game is just the overall simulation that exists around you and the NPCs you can use to take part in it. You can send them off to run missions for you, they can handle supply lines that you like, or gather resources for your own business while you go off do your own thing, tooting around the black. Toot, toot. While the X series has been pumping out titles since the 20th century, literally 1999, X4 itself came out in 2018 and has been getting enthusiastically updated regularly by Egosoft. We've already seen recent updates looking at terraforming planets, updating the flight model courtesy of Star Citizen's previous guru, John Pritchett, and a visual update that came in recently. But now they are moving on to diplomacy. Not the most expected gameplay in a space sim. Now we have to deal with space politicians. This means you now have these envoys who can run negotiations for you and steer the outcomes of major events around the star system. Yeah, with thousands of space stations and planets and factions in the game that you can interact with, this is actually going to make a pretty big difference. You can run inter-faction interference to create power shifts between other factions, possibly creating wars, shortages, or more agreeable trade relations for yourself and your own empire. This is just another prong in which you can affect the world around you, and it sounds like it's being integrated as a pretty core part of the game, so I wouldn't expect it to be abandoned or not considered with updates that continue further on in the future. There are some other things in this update that are useful, like UI updates, DLS frame generation, new crafting options, and voiceover support for Portuguese, along with some other things here and there. I'll leave the patch notes down below, but diplomacy is the big one here. Again, this is the beta, and we'll see how it goes when it gets to the live game, but this seems like a good update, and it keeps X4 at the forefront of the space game genre. Alright, here's one to add to your list.
Status report.
Directive 8020 is a cinematic, story-focused game from the likes of Supermassive Games, makers of the Dark Pictures anthology and Until Dawn. And if you like story-based games, pick these up. They are really, really good. Their games are less gameplay focused and more about making you make hard decisions and deal with consequences and get your crew out of the game alive. And this one looks kind of like The Thing in space. And I say it's less gameplay focused, but this one actually has more stealth elements and a scanner that allows you to show which of your crewmates are actually human versus the monsters, so there is more gameplay starting to come into their games that I think will keep people feeling a little more engaged. But ultimately, these games dwell on a good story, character writing, and decision making that the fans of the series absolutely love, and I think bringing that formula over to the space game genre, it's gonna be good for us space nerds. It'll be a third-person horror story where you have to navigate your damaged ship, identify whether your crewmates are real or monsters, and considering you're 12 light years from Earth, probably not get out alive. It was originally announced to come out later this year, but just recently it has been delayed to the first half of 2026. so you do have some time to add this one to your wish list and stock up on some new underwear. That is it for this week's Space Games News Update. If you're looking for more daily news, go check out Space Tomato 2. If you're looking for people to chat about it with, you can come over to our Discord. And if you're looking for the folks who keep this stuff coming every week, look no further than down below on the screen here. They're good people. Say thanks, say hi. Enjoy your week, folks. Play more space games, and give thanks to the almighty vast expanse that is space. I'll see you next week.